Welcome to episode 300 of the Baunfire Gaming Podcast. I'm your host, Morgan, aka Baun Diesel, and this week we'll be talking about the past and future of the podcast, leaked PS5 Pro designs, Black Myth Wukong drama, and legitimately much more. I will be doing a little segment at the end of this show to talk about the 300th episode, to do a little Q&A and stuff like that. So hang out until then, or jump ahead if that's what you want to hear. Before we get started, subscribe to The Baunfire on your favorite podcast app and leave a review on Spotify or iTunes, or subscribe to the Baun Diesel YouTube channel to get all of my videos, including this podcast. Thank you to everyone who supports as YouTube members and Twitch subscribers. It is currently September. You can get cheaper Twitch subscriptions, and I do plan on streaming a bit more in the next couple months, hopefully like forever, but we'll see. If you're interested in supporting this podcast and all of my other content, please check out the link in the show description. You can also support my show by sharing new episodes on any social media platforms or just sharing it with a friend. Let's get into the gaming news. Starting off with Xbox, we got a report that Raven Software, one of the ABK acquisitions, is accusing Microsoft and Activision of bad faith negotiations with their union. So I believe this was the studio that fairly recently was one of the big kind of highlight stories of hey, Microsoft is letting these studios be unionized. And I think this was the first one that was a big regular development studio and not just a QA studio. For whatever reason, I'm sure if you're in the industry, you may know why. QA studios have been all the ones actually getting unionized. This was kind of a big story because I think it was one of the first big AAA studios that this was happening with that wasn't QA. Hopefully this is going to be a bit of a shot across the bow to Microsoft and Activision to, get it together and come in good faith with these negotiations, because there's going to be precedent set here. I think that this unionization movement is only going to get bigger, at least in the in the United States. I already believe a lot of studios in other countries are unionized, especially under the big AAA publishers, but this is probably going to become more normal here in the States, and they probably need to try to handle it the right way because it's likely not going away. We also found out that Blizzard is working on an unannounced AAA RPG first-person shooter, and this was discovered from a LinkedIn post from one of their developers. This happens every now and then. It's kind of tough because anyone can put anything on a LinkedIn profile. Every time this happens, the developer unfortunately probably gets contacted by someone in management and they say, take that off of your LinkedIn profile. What are you doing? And then they change it. And whether it's accurate or not, with the preponderance of projects that get canceled and things like that nowadays, it's kind of hard to take this stuff seriously because this person probably was working on this. But it could have gotten canceled years ago, for all we know. It's probably not worth getting too deep into, but it's still interesting nonetheless. Moving over to some PlayStation news, Sony is raising prices in Japan for their consoles to the equivalent of about $90. This was an interesting coincidence because right when this happened, Xbox hardware moved from not being ranked in the top 100 in Japan to being number 8 on the a game and console sales chart. This probably isn't the big deal that some console warriors wanted to be. I'm under the impression, due to some economic reasons, this is more of a inflationary raise, and even though I think even myself typically thinks of Japan as a stronghold for PlayStation, in some reports I read after this happened, it actually sounds like that's not really true, and it hasn't been for a while. That people just don't realize that Nintendo has a hilarious lockdown, especially in Japan, on the gaming market there. And Sony, PlayStation is definitely more popular than say like Xbox, which I think has been surprisingly popular this gen compared to like in the Xbox One. I swear there was a report at one point that they sold less than like 1,000 Xboxes in Japan or something like of the Xbox One gen. That may not be completely accurate. I do remember though that the number was like weirdly tiny. In that, because I remember, I believe shortly after the series consoles came out, they beat the lifetime sales of the one console generation like really, really fast. And I think it was off the back of COVID shortages, but also the Series S, I think, was really popular in Japan because of its lower price, entry level, stuff like that. Regardless, the Sony thing is interesting, but I've already seen some of the kind of like, I'm definitely an Xbox preferrer. I've made that very clear. But I'm not going to be someone be like, "Ooh, look at Sony raising the price of their console in Japan." Like, this isn't that big of a deal, more than likely, especially when you consider that like the vast majority of consoles this generation that are going to be sold are sold already. Like, there's still going to be sales in the future, and there could be many more in a lot of capacities. I just don't think this is like some big crazy thing. I suspect that this is not going to be that big of a deal. We also got a possible PS5 Pro design leak, and it kind of just looks like the most recent iteration of the PS5, the slim model that I think some people call it. And then it just kind of has some more cosmetic changes to show that it's this Pro model. This isn't that surprising. I think if people were expecting some like giant changes to the way the PS5 looked, it sounds like the hardware is not going to be that much different. I believe it's going to be the same CPU, or at least this is what's been leaked or alleged and talked about by like Digital Foundry and things like that. Pretty reputable folks. But that the GPU will be fairly beefed up, but that it could be mostly the focus on increased ray tracing performance. Long story short, it sounds like it's going to be a decent upgrade, but probably not anywhere near what they're probably going to charge for it. We don't know what that's going to be. I've seen rumors between $500 to $700. I highly doubt they're going to sell it for $500. What we need to realize is that these Pro consoles, like the PS4 Pro and the Xbox Series or Xbox One X, when they did that last gen, neither one of them sold very well. And they were really just there for the like super fans. And like they go into selling consoles like that, not really expecting that many people to buy them. If anything, if it causes a drop in price of the original consoles of the gen, it's way more likely it's going to sell more of those because of a lower price point. My guess is we're going to see the PS5, the base one, probably lower in price even more in general, besides in Japan, I guess. To maybe around $400, and I think this comes out $600. The PS5 Pro. It could be even higher. The PlayStation's a little bit like Apple, where I think they know they can kind of charge whatever they want, and people will buy it. The little portal thing is probably too expensive, but people still bought it and apparently purchased it pretty readily. The PSVR 2, way too expensive for what it is, even though it's good tech. It's just the price point's insane. And even though they haven't made any games for it, I believe the hardware actually sold okay, especially now that it works on PC. So price-wise, we'll have to wait and see, but it does seem pretty likely that this is going to be announced in early September, as early as like next week or in the next 2 weeks, and that it may come out in December. That all of the insiders are still saying it's definitely coming this year, and so December would still obviously make that happen. Jeff Grubb is also rumoring that there is a state of play that's supposed to happen at the end of September. So if they do this blog to announce the PS5 Pro in early September, then at the end of the month, they can show like, hey, here's some of our games running on the PS5 Pro. See how it's 4K, 60 FPS, or see how this ray tracing looks better than it does on the base system. It'll be their kind of opportunity to showcase the console a bit and see what's going on there. I think it is interesting that it still seems almost certain there's no rumors of a Pro console coming from Xbox. I still think that they are gonna skip that because they know it's probably not worth it for them, especially. And it's going to be way better for them to try to jump ahead of the hardware. And I wouldn't be surprised if they forego a Pro and try to put out their next gen console in like 2026, which will likely put them out, 6 months, a year, maybe more ahead of the PS6. You're not going to see Sony panic. I think that they're doing just fine when it comes to their console sales, which they're always, very focused on and should probably be pretty happy about. Even if the PS5 generation is never going to reach those like PlayStation 2 or even PlayStation 4 numbers, considering COVID and all of the other stuff that's been going on this gen, I suspect even now at 60 plus million, they're probably pretty happy, especially because they don't have the issue that Xbox has, where Xbox has sold 30-ish million consoles, which is okay, but there's a good chance that half of those are Series S's, which come in at a lower price point and probably a lower profit margin, where PlayStation, they've sold 60 plus million, and those have all been the same price point or close to it. Between digital and the disc version, especially early, it sounds like the digital version basically didn't exist. It was more of a marketing thing. Say, hey, we have a $400 one. You can't find it, but we do. And then they sell, 40 million of their $500 consoles. So, yeah, I'm going to be really curious to what the Pro actually brings from a hardware perspective and then how well it sells. You just can't doubt Sony. It's probably going to do pretty well, and it's probably going to be good hardware, even if it's not the. I think that people got a little confused or misled by the last gen with the One X and the PS4 Pro, because the base consoles are just were kind of bad, just not very good consoles, power wise, and the PS4 Pro and the One X weren't that much better, but they were enough better that it actually kind of felt like a jump in performance. You actually had a lot of games that could run at 4K 60 FPS, which was something you weren't getting at all early in the gen. And we've mirrored that a little bit with this generation of consoles, but there's just been so many factors this gen. It's going to be interesting to look back one day. Then the final bit here was that the former Bungie director of Marathon, Chris Barrett, was let go due to inappropriate behaviors and with coworkers. So they have disputed this, saying it was just like a misunderstanding, which is, with that stuff, kind of the standard line, or at least allegedly the standard line. I don't know what happened, and I never will. But I just think hopefully people like that stay out of the industry, but they probably won't. There's always someone willing to take a chance on them. As for Nintendo, we had a partner showcase and Indie World showcase. Cool. If you're into Nintendo, if that's your thing, I hope you enjoyed those things. Jumping into non-platform news, we have a real interesting one here, for me at least. Black Myth Wukong has had kind of an interesting story. It's kind of been without controversy, but it still has had some, mostly because of how they announced that it wouldn't be coming to Xbox on the launch day. That came out on PC and PlayStation. That's been kind of an interesting story, just because there's been, not really, I don't think any like official statements, but there's been kind of a lot of vague statements from a lot of people. It was suggested that they didn't say exactly why it wasn't coming to Xbox, but everyone always goes straight to, oh, well, the Series S is having problems. We had that issue with Baldur's Gate 3 when it came out. It wasn't really a performance issue necessarily. It was the split screen where the game had the hardware has to render that game twice, which, the 4 teraflop or whatever, Series S just struggled with, even at its lower fidelity. And due to Xbox kind of requiring parity between versions of the games, it caused issues. Well, with this, that was the allegation. Then Xbox back in June put out a statement saying like, hey, we're working with our partners to try to get all the games on our platform. But then they had this kind of weird thing in their statement from like the official Xbox statement on Wukong not coming to their platform on day one. They were kind of like, we can't comment on the deals that, our partners make with other platforms, which kind of raised a lot of eyebrows. I believe after that, someone in the sphere of the Wukong developers or Sony or someone said like, there's no exclusivity deal. It's, just basically denied it. We moved on. Game came out. It's done extremely well, especially in China, but everywhere it's reviewed okay. It's, was extremely popular for a few days on Steam, blah, blah, blah. Then we have a report come out from independent reports from Forbes and IGN, and then Jez Corden coming out and talking about how there is an exclusivity deal, and that it's not the software and hardware issues that had been rumored that are keeping the game off of there. Again, reiterating that back in June, Xbox basically suggested that, but without actually saying it out loud. I don't know if there's like legal reasons there, or if it's just kind of like a little bit of, taking little pot shots. I don't know. I don't know enough about the industry to go in on that. So then that story went around yesterday. I'm recording this on Friday, August 30th. On the 29th, that was everywhere. Even I commented quite a bit on it. So then today on the 30th, Jeff Grubb, a few other kind of super fan influencer folks, and some people have come out saying that, Sony, that there is no exclusivity deal. And it sounds like the allegation, at least, is that Sony did pitch in money and paid to help with some of the development stuff or costs for the Wukong development studio to help finish the game, but that there was no explicit agreement to get an exclusivity deal. So now we have this weird situation where people are kind of hearing different things. It doesn't seem super clear. What was interesting is that now, the writer from the Forbes article, who was Paul Tassi, has kind of said like, look, my source told me what they told me and I believe them. But then also pointed out that like in Jeff Grubb's statement that he talked about on his Game Mess show about how like, basically it sounds like no one's probably completely right and no one's completely wrong in this situation. The consideration I have had is that, so one of the rumors is that there's a memory leak in the game that's causing performance issues. So Xbox didn't certify it, so they couldn't put it on their platform. I'm wondering if, maybe due to that extra development money, the studio was able to fix that issue for PlayStation and just didn't have the resources to fix it on Xbox yet. That's why it's out on PlayStation. It's not on Xbox. That's the non-exclusivity argument. Or maybe they are having issues with the Series S. I don't know. The tough thing here for me is that on both sides of this are people I don't believe. So you have like Paul Tassi at Forbes, who, in my opinion, is very clickbaity and just not the best like traditional journalist on earth. The IGN writer is Kat Bailey, who I think is pretty legit, at least in my history. She's also a human. She's not perfect. She could have gotten something wrong. And then Jez Corden has a lot of good sources, is also a pretty big Xbox defender, at least in most situations. So they all have their issues, right? And then the same thing, Jeff Grubb, I've seen people really be high on him. I have found him to be incredibly unreliable in this stuff. He definitely, celebrates his wins and tries to move on from his wrongs pretty quickly, and has the right kind of apparatus around him to make sure that all the things he gets wrong kind of get forgotten. And then occasionally when he's right, that it's a big deal. I don't know. There's also some more baggage there that I'll get into maybe one other day. And then some of the other people disputing this exclusivity thing are just straight up like PlayStation, like influencers. No better or worse than like Jez Corden is for Xbox. So it's one of those weird situations where my assumption is that there's probably, I think they all probably have their sources who are telling them the things that they're repeating. And it's very likely that on the studio who's making the game or PlayStation side, that there's just not maybe super synced up information, and maybe there is a thing, maybe there isn't. Maybe there's an exclusivity deal that isn't like official, but because they helped pay for it, they got priority when it came to getting the game working on their platform, and Xbox just doesn't get that deal. I think at the end of the day, for me, I don't really care about these third-party exclusives, and especially when they're timed, when the game will eventually come. All the platforms do this, especially between Xbox and PlayStation. PlayStation does it a lot more, and that's fine. My issue is that if there is an exclusivity deal, and there were like rumors, and I think even some like fairly official, like actual developers from that studio, like blaming it on Xbox hardware, blaming it on Xbox. If there was an exclusivity deal chilling in the background there, that was the actual reason for the game not coming, I mean, that's really shady. Like, that's really shady stuff. If there wasn't one, then okay. Like if there was a problem with the software, with a memory leak, if there is a problem with the hardware with the Series S, then those are all reasonable explanations. It's gotten to the point where I've read enough of this and seen all the fanboy stuff, all the console warriors battling it out over this. I now kind of just don't care. We're never going to find out the complete truth. I suspect it falls somewhere in the middle of all of this stuff. And I just don't like this stuff. I hate how, this kind of story becomes such a feeding fest, including me. I got into it as well. I don't know. It's interesting. So I highly doubt we'll ever get the complete truth about what happened, and I'll be curious to if we ever do. I think the only confirmation we would ever really get is if Black Myth Wukong comes out exactly 6 months after or 12 months after it did on PlayStation. Then maybe we can be like, it looks like maybe there was a deal. If it comes out before then or after then maybe it really was a more complicated issue than that. And the final thing I'll leave on this is it's possible that all these things are true. It's possible there's an exclusivity deal, that the software, the game has a memory leak for Xbox that hasn't been fixed yet on their version of the game. And it's possible the Series S is holding back the game to a quality level they aren't happy with, because I'm under the impression it doesn't run great on PlayStation, the PS5, which means it's going to struggle at least a little on Series X, and it's definitely going to struggle on Series S, depending on the quality level that they want to get from that. So likely all these things are true. Likely we'll never find out. We'll see. I'll report more if we get more information on it at a later time. I did want to give, I finished Star Wars Outlaws. If you saw my video earlier this week or last week, depending on when you're listening to this, I gave kind of like a in progress review. I plan on next week probably doing a actual review of the game that will probably be fairly short, because I already said a lot of how I feel about it in my early review. No spoilers here. I will do spoilers in the final review. I definitely cooled on the game a little bit by the time I finished it. I still like it has a 77 Metacritic score right now. I think that's perfect. I'm not going to be calling for this game to be my game of the year. That's at this point still Hellblade. I don't think it's a bad game either, though. Like, I still am pretty stubborn about, like, I saw some people give this game like a 4 out of 10. That's insane. Like, I know it's subjective and I know everyone has their own opinion, and I'm not saying that people can't. But, like, I watched, some of the conversations from the people who gave this game a 4 out of 10 or lower or in that range, or read their articles and things like that. Again, to each their own, but I don't think that any of them justify the score that low. It seems like some people went into it not wanting to like it. It seems like some people didn't finish the game, even though they claimed they did, or didn't really like get into the game, maybe just golden pathed it and didn't like it. And after finishing it, if I golden pathed that game, which I suspect a lot of these people did, I wouldn't have liked it at all, potentially. But because I did kind of dig into it a little bit and enjoyed it and tried to like, do more than just the golden path, I think that changed my opinion a little bit. I still think the game looked incredible. I still really like the characters for the most part. I still really like the story for the most part. When I do the full review, talk about spoilers, I'll get more into that. I think the story gets pretty weak towards the end, and gameplay wise, the accusations of it being repetitive, I actually think that's fair, but I like the gameplay. So it being repetitive, like maybe I wish it would have evolved a little bit. Towards the end, I definitely wish they wouldn't have made some of the choices they made. Without spoiling anything, I think when you're in the final part of your game in the story, you should really streamline that so it's a fun, enjoyable experience, and there's no like roadblocks put in the way or things that feel like they're slowing down the momentum. And you should definitely be careful about what the final sequence of your game is going to be, and make sure it's not something that's kind of tedious. But I'll get into that. What I will say is that even though I did cool on the game quite a bit, and even though I maybe didn't love the game as much as maybe I wish I would have, it didn't ruin the experience for me. I still would give this a solid 7.5, almost an 8 out of 10, I think is where I'm sitting. I think 7.5 is kind of where I would be, and that's good. There's nothing wrong with that. That's a great score for a game. For me, there's also the idea of, when I know the stuff these guys have worked on before, going from a looter shooter like the Division 1 and 2, and then that team, for the most part, being the ones who made this, it's a big change to go from that loop in that kind of game to what they did here. And what I think they did here was great. I think most people will enjoy this game. I think most people should try it out and play it. I think it may be good to wait on the sale that is inevitably coming, because it's an Ubisoft game. Here in a few months, you'll be able to get it for half the price probably. I would not pay for the big versions with the cosmetics and all that. That's pointless. If you're going to get the game, get the base version. And for most people, I'd probably suggest waiting for a sale. But I liked it. I thought Star Wars Outlaws was great. I think that team should be really proud of themselves for what they did, especially, again, diving into something very new for them as a studio. Obviously, the individuals who work there, I'm sure, have done this kind of stuff, based on their previous employment, with the different devs, the way they bounce around and stuff. But yeah, Outlaws, great game. I highly suggest playing it at some point. I don't think everyone needs it at full price, though. So there's my thoughts on that. Look for the full review next week. Yoshi P at Square Enix says that Final Fantasy XIV had a good response on Xbox, and that we should expect more Final Fantasy games on the platform in the future. There's been the rumors about Final Fantasy XVI coming to it. We thought maybe we would get an announcement for that during Gamescom, but that didn't happen. They just announced the PC port. So we'll see what happens with that. If Square Enix is going to be true to their word, they've softened on the exclusivity a lot in the last year. And that they seem to feel like that's not really working for them. As we saw that, I believe sales of like Final Fantasy Rebirth weren't really that great. And even though it seems like pretty universally people think that's a better game than the previous part of that remake, I still think them breaking that remake into 3 parts is just a money grab. I think it's insane that they're doing it, but people seem to be okay with it. And so what do I know? But it would be really cool to see more Final Fantasy on Xbox, even just for the people who maybe care more about that than I do. Valve's secret quote-unquote game, Deadlock, has surpassed 100,000 players. This is pretty impressive because I don't believe this is open. It's invite only. I believe it's a deal where if you have an invite, you can invite other people, and they're kind of doing the testing that way. It sounds like people are saying this isn't really anything super new or innovative from Valve. It's just kind of an evolution of these other types of games that have already been out. I believe this is kind of like the lane clearing game, like Dota or something like that. Not my thing at all. Couldn't care less about it, but it's just interesting seeing Valve put out a game potentially soon. I just want Half-Life 3. Good God, just please give me Half-Life 3 one day. Even though at this point, they would basically be bringing it to an entire new generation of gamers. So who knows if that's going to happen or not. Annapurna and Remedy are teaming up with a co-publishing deal for Control 2. This has been an interesting one because the reporting on this, I've seen people being like, oh, that's awesome. I love Annapurna, which is like a really, really consistent and really good, like independent, like indie publisher. And obviously people love Remedy and Control and Alan Wake and all that stuff. I think the part of the story I haven't seen anyone report, so maybe I'm wrong, but I'm assuming this is happening because Remedy probably needs some financial help. because at least the last thing I saw was that the sales of Alan Wake 2 were like bad, were just not good, especially for what that game probably took from a resource and finance perspective. That they worked on that game for a really long time, and its production level is insanely high when it comes to all of the things like the voice acting and animation and things like that. So I am curious to what this will end up being. I don't think like Remedy's in trouble or anything. I suspect that this is just one of those things where, you know, we know that they're working on, I believe, like the Max Payne remakes, Control 2. I doubt they're working on anything Alan Wake right now. And they may be doing some other stuff. Like they've helped with some really weird kind of random deals. I assume mostly just to make money as like a co-developer. There's that Crossfire X game where it's like a super popular shooter game, competitive game in Asia that they tried to make a version here, and it was awful. And then it had a single player story that was made by Remedy, and I played a little bit of it, and you could tell, like, you could see their chops in it because, you know, that part of it was okay. But man, that game was awful. That game was so bad. It wasn't good. So, but they probably didn't do it to make the best game ever. They did it to probably make some money to support their other projects. So curious to see how that plays out. I actually don't really like Control that much, so I could care less about Control 2 coming out. But I still enjoy kind of learning about the lore, the kind of shared world of that and Alan Wake and how they've been putting all that stuff together. There's even a rumor that Quantum Break, the Xbox exclusive game from back in the day, is also in this world. And you can see some clues of that in Alan Wake 2. I mean, I like what they're trying to do there, but I'm just, you know, we'll see. We found out that CD Projekt Red has gone into full production of the next Witcher game, and they do this really. I love this. I wish BioWare and other studios would do this. Periodically, CDPR will put out this like pie chart showing how many people are working on each of their projects. Because it's Cyberpunk 2077, we have the next Witcher game, we have the next Cyberpunk game, we have a multiplayer Witcher game or Witcher or Cyberpunk, I can't remember, and then like a new IP. And they have like a breakdown of how many people are working on each, and they've been doing that for a while. Cyberpunk 2077 finally has 0 workers. They're no longer working on that game. You know, I have a lot of qualms with CDPR and with that game, and I have lots of thoughts about it. But beyond that, I'm glad that they did finally finish that game eventually and put out like a really good DLC and all that stuff. But people shouldn't be surprised about this, especially as the Witcher game goes into full production. We will probably see that game in 2 or 3 years. I don't think people normally realize that, yeah, like games can take 5, 6, 7 years to make, but typically that's a lot of pre-production and like delays and stuff. Full production on these games typically doesn't take as long as you think, in theory, as long as pre-production went well, the scaffolding's there. Once they put their whole team on it, things tend to kind of chug through and come out faster than you think. That also means that, you know, the next Cyberpunk game is probably still 6, 7 plus years away, and then so on and so forth. So I suspect that multiplayer game, they probably don't intend to be as far away, but we'll have to wait and see. So good for them over there. And then NetEase and Tencent, 2 of the big financiers of video games everywhere lately, but especially in Asia, maybe pulling back from some of their Japanese studio investments, including a rumor and a likelihood they're shuttering the studio that just put out Visions of Mana, which got like kind of lukewarm reviews, but it like just came out, and there's rumors that they've already laid off most of the staff. That's wild. That's crazy. So unfortunately, while that story has kind of taken a backseat to other stories lately, the layoffs and all that stuff are still there. I'm really curious here in the States, as interest rates seem like they're going to start going down, if we're going to see publishers going back to really leaning on using financing to pay their workers, and if we'll, heaven forbid, see another hiring rush again, which will then lead to layoffs in the future. It'll be curious to see how all of that happens. And then here at the end of the show, I wanted to acknowledge that this is the 300th episode. If you're still listening to this day, I really appreciate it. It's a few less people than there used to be, but I'm still happy to do this show. I really enjoy it, really just as a project. I like hearing myself talk, I guess. I actually hate hearing myself talk, but I like having an outlet to talk about all these stories and kind of give my takes on them and maybe bring you some stories that you wouldn't have heard about otherwise. If you don't know, this podcast started back in 2018 as the Echo Cast, a reference to the echoes in the Division games, where you can kind of see things that happened in the past based off of collected data from all the devices. It was called an Echo. It was a cool lore thing in that game. It was a Division only podcast for, I believe, until 2021 is when I started to switch over and talk about more topics and kind of turned it into a general gaming podcast. I obviously still talk about the Division when I feel like it. I talked a lot about Mass Effect there for a while, and will, as that stuff comes out, obviously talk about a lot about Dragon Age. And I use this as a vehicle to talk about things I care about, but also trying to kind of delve into parts of the industry I am not so interested in, like PlayStation, things like that, because I think it's good for me to know about those things that are happening. So for the future of the show, I don't know. It's interesting. We've hit 300 episodes. To hit 400, I would have to do the podcast for basically another 2 years. We'll see. I don't want to stop podcasting. I really enjoy doing this. I have another podcast. It's the Mass Effect Hypecast, where it's primarily there to talk about the upcoming Mass Effect game. So whenever there's news about that, I like talking about it. I don't want to start over, because with that show, it's been very telling of when you have 300 episodes, people are more willing to come check your show out, I think. When you have 5, a little bit less so. It has been interesting that I used to get basically all of the listens I used to get through Apple and Spotify and things like that, I now get on YouTube. It seems like most of the people that listen are on YouTube now, because my listens through traditional podcast apps is very low now, where the YouTube side of things tends to be fairly high. I had a big goal this year of trying to fix that, of trying to reach out to more people. I have tried to do some things to change the podcast, and I don't know. I don't know what to do. I've done all the things I think I can do by just being a solo guy doing this for fun. I have thought about reaching out for some help, and the thing is that this is a fun hobby, and it's not really worth it for me to dump a bunch of money into marketing and people advising and things like that, because I'm never going to make this my full-time job. I don't really want it to be. I see the things people have to do that, and I'm good. I don't want to do that. So I don't plan on stopping this anytime soon. We may see another rebrand one day. We may see me try to keep myself entertained as time goes on. Almost certainly see a logo change in the next year or two, because I like tinkering with stuff. But the Echo Cast, the Baunfire, whatever it is now or in the future, will persist at some point. I think unless literally no one listens. If I ever got down to 0, maybe I would quit. But the couple hundred of you now keeping me going, you can blame yourselves, I guess. As part of this, I opened up in my Discord for some Q&A for some people who listen. These are all familiar names to the show, and I'll take a couple of minutes here to answer those questions. So NeuroNix, a very long-time supporter since my early Division days, asked, how much time do you spend per episode aside from the actual recording? So most of my recordings are between 30 and 60 minutes. This is where... it's probably too late now for it to make a big difference, but this is probably where I could do better with production. I edit the show. It happens. It takes maybe 30 minutes to render the show when I render the video. Depending on the show, may take 5 or 10 minutes to edit. I think it would be really smart for me to work on some better transitions to kind of professionalize it up a little bit. I don't want to go over the top with it, but I think extending the amount of time I spend editing would probably be a good thing for the show. If I really wanted to pull in more people, pretty bare bones right now. And I like it that way because it's efficient and it's easy. But I think if I want to attract more people, increasing that number would probably be a good thing. I had 3 Eskimo. If you could interview any video game character, who would it be and why is it, or not Rex from Mass Effect? I'd be too scared of him and his big old quads to interview him. Video game character, I mean, it would have to be Mass Effect Shepard, right? Either Mass Effect Shepard or... No, it would be them. Yeah. So, on that note, I should have mentioned it during the regular show. If you haven't seen the trailer or the commercial, whatever, the video for the Mass Effect board game, there's a trailer for it now, and it has Mark Meer as Shepard talking about the mission you're going on in this board game, and so it's new dialogue from Shepard, and man, it gave me goosebumps. So, on that note, go check that video out. It's the Morpheus board game company. They're making a Mass Effect board game, and the trailer for it like gave me chills. YouTube's what inspired you to get into this in the first place? I joked in the Discord that my answer here is very predictable. It's because I thought other people were wrong and saying things and doing things in bad faith. In the Division community, when I first started into it, I got involved in never really forums, but like the Reddit side of things and the Twitter social media side of things. That's when I joined Twitter, was back then. And there were a lot of people being real toxic and being real wrong about a lot of stuff. And I got so annoyed with it that I decided I would figure out how to stream and make videos. And I decided to tweet a lot. And that eventually turned into, after almost a year, me saying, hey, I'm going to do a podcast. And that's how the EchoCast began. The EchoCast began literally like a week before I got invited to E3 to see the Division 2 get revealed. And so that all kind of happened quickly. I had a pretty quick rise, if that's what you want to call it. I've never been really influential, even in the Division community. I was like a little bit known by a few people. More than anything, I got to know a lot of devs, and I got to kind of get in the good graces of a lot of people. And that's how I got started. That's what it started off on. At one point, I wanted to do this stuff full time, like 6 years ago. Like it was a really long time ago, maybe 5 years ago. Not anymore, not even a little bit. But yeah, I got started because I thought people were being bad at talking about the Division, and then that kind of spread to everything else. Have I become part of the problem? I don't know. I hope not. The goal is not to be, but I guess that's not up to me to decide. And then Strung had a bunch of questions for me, so I'll kind of rapid fire them. If it wasn't the Division, which game would you cover on your YouTube channel, or would it even be gaming at all? I mean, it was the Division is what motivated me. Now, in hindsight, I mean, I definitely consider myself probably more of a Mass Effect creator than I even do the Division. But even then, it would be games. Games are the thing I care the most about outside of my like adult responsibilities and like the people I love and stuff. It's, this is my main hobby. I play some volleyball. I work out a little bit. I do other things as well, but like, this is my thing. Video games and talking about them is my thing. You aren't going to see many people who will do this as long as I've done it with as little success as I've had. And not to disparage myself, but if we're being honest, who would keep doing it. Especially if their goals were money or fame or notoriety or influence. I don't really have any of those things, but I still do this stuff just because I like it. So yeah, it would definitely be games, no matter what. Ever thought of doing a voiceover for audiobooks? Maybe. I still think I sound like a little kid. Like my voice that comes out isn't what I hear. So I've never really thought about that stuff. I also am not the best, the clearest reader on earth. I don't have the clearest speaking voice either all the time. I sometimes have the fat guy, tripping over my my fat neck sometimes. I mean, if anyone ever wanted me to do something like that, I'd it'd be really cool, but no one's reached out yet. So if they ever do, I'll let you guys know. Name one food item that you absolutely love or hate. I love burritos. Burritos are my favorite thing on earth. I'm uncultured swine in the middle of the United States, so Chipotle is my probably my favorite burrito, even though I've definitely had better ones other places. That's the one I can most accessibly get. As for what I hate is sauerkraut, and that's mostly because my heritage is German. Especially when I was younger, my relatives took it pretty seriously, and we always did the the New Year's Day sauerkraut and all that. And I hate the smell of it. I hate the texture of it. I hate the taste of it. Disgusting. Can't do it. If my heritage is taken from me because of that, so be it. If it wasn't for layoffs and other stuff, would you consider a game dev career in production, marketing, and management? Nah. Even with the layoff, the layoffs are definitely the main reason. That I've absolutely applied. I've applied for a ton of game dev jobs. The thing I'd be the most qualified for would be community development, and that seems like the biggest nightmare of a job ever. I think companies are getting better with protecting the people who do that stuff, not letting their individual comm devs become like personalities in their community as much, because that just leads to bad things, it seems like. Actually getting into game dev, I don't think I have the creativity or the voice for that. I just don't know what I would do. Comm dev would be the only thing, and that seems like a nightmare. So it'd be interesting, but I think getting to know a lot of devs and learning a lot more about the industry has kind of, it's like a don't meet your heroes moment where, being a game dev doesn't seem quite as glorious as it did when I was even just getting started in covering games. Then the final one here, any skills you wish that you would pick up, music, art, woodworking, stuff like that. Not really. I wish I was a little more handy. Like, I'm fairly handy. I can fix or at least patch up most things around our house or with our cars and things like that. I'm not musical at all, and I don't really have any interest. I love listening to music, but I have no desire to play music, even though my little one is very musical, and we're definitely going to have to start to incubate that a little bit. I'm really artistic. I like art a lot. I've gotten... so I don't think I'd want to pick up any of these things, but of the ideas, getting back into art would be something I would love. I would love to start drawing again. There was a hot moment where I almost thought about getting one of those digital drawing pads and getting into doing some like digital art, drawing video game characters and things like that. And then it didn't happen. So maybe that's something I should explore. I was really, really into art and drawing and stuff when I was little, not little, basically through high school. And then I got away from it. I got busy. So maybe that's the thing I'll pick up at some point, maybe partially inspired by this. So, so 300 episodes. If you're listening, thank you so much. I love doing this thing. I love what I've built here, even if it's not taking the world by storm. I'm very proud of it, and I really appreciate anyone who is still listening to this day. And I just, thank you. I really, truly appreciate that. Doing a quick personal update. You probably can't notice if you're watching the video. I did paint my office. The office is now, it looks really great. I'm really proud of myself. I think I did a good job. And now I have my desk kind of where I want it. Now it's to buy, the furniture, where I'm turning about half the room into storage, half the room into my office. So now I'm going to start looking to buy some, cabinets and bookshelves for the background, so I can put all my little trinkets and toys and collectibles back up. I'm creating like a little business center in here too, with a printer and all that crap. And then the storage shelves on the other side of the room, you'll never see those, so you don't need to worry about them. But that's coming along nicely, and that's kind of what I have. So we're gonna wrap this show up. So again, thank you for 300. Thank you so much for listening to this episode. Please consider supporting all of my content by watching my videos, listening to the podcast, sharing all of that stuff with anyone you know who may be interested. Follow my socials, and even consider throwing a few bucks my way, either as a YouTube member, Twitch subscriber, or buying some merch. You can find links for all of that stuff at a link down in the description of the show. If you have your own topics, if you have your own questions or feedback, be sure to let me know. You can do that in the Discord. You can do that in the YouTube comments. You can even hit me up on Twitter at BonDiesel or at the Baunfire, which I also have those on Threads. If you're on there as well, please check me out. That is all I have for the 300th episode of the Baunfire Gaming Podcast. So, until next time.